light.
Webcam is called, but it was like Amazon. So it's like influencer TikTok webcam.
Hell yeah.
It's
Start doing
pretty
some TikToks.
it's pretty nice, honestly. But okay, I'll just post this on the Patreon. Yeah, but the Stephanie Rhule thing, I don't know if it's too late. Let me see if I can find a way to send it to you. But I was able to find it was really good for us, just like on Patreon and all of our other things, just like those kind of dunk tweets, I think are good.
Yeah. Well, that one has such an easy answer too, and I can also bait Destiny because he said some super dumb shit about that. He made that exact argument like during the primary. It's like that's not what he was there to do, is to pass like bills with like one of the most like neoliberal through a period of extreme neoliberalism. He's not like gonna be passing bills he wants to be passing. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Jesus.
Dude, we're live, by the way.
Are we live? Oh, yeah. We're already live. Hey, everybody. I guess we're live. I need to change that setting in YouTube, but I guess, are you ready to go? We're ready to go.
Yeah, let me just post it to everything real quick.
Yeah, we'll let people... Yeah. I mean, maybe we should just start with that then. Actually, let's start with Stephanie Rhule. She's more interesting than Siskind. Yeah, it's the cold open for everybody.
Welcome
to Left Reckoning. This is I think maybe the second episode.'We'll start numbering these in a while. I think this is 2, right? I can confidently number this number 2.
I think so.
And we've got a big lineup for you today. I'm very well prepared today.
Yeah, you can tell
all about Tyson. I spent last night reading about Tyson, and man, there's no lack of material there. You just scratch the surface of the number one food producer apparently in the country, and it smells rank. But before we get to that, you want to say something about Tyson?
Oh, it's just like, I'm just a little teaser. It's like Tyson and meat packing and meat processing, these have always been horrendous industries, and it's just amazing to see them dial it up to 10 during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to access my Google Docs, but I'm having a bit of a sign-in issue. Let's see. Here we are. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So let's do we have this? Or what are we going to say? You think we should?
Oh no, I was just saying it might be better to just reset so we can have everything ready to go.
Yeah, good point. Because we kind of did get thrown into this.
Yeah.
In an we'll just existential sense. Well, we can't turn it off.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this time. But here I'm able to access this now. So, folks, we'll get right into this bit of. Oh man, we got a lot of notes here. So. Stephanie Rhule, here she is. Okay, so David pointed this out. This is sort of like the perfect clip to demonstrate why we are doing a show. Stephanie Rhule had Bernie Sanders on, and gave him one of the like talking points that really, I mean, is sort of old by this point, and there's a very easy response to it. But let's just play it first, and we can we can respond to it later.
Senator, I'm not agreeing with you fundamentally, but I want to talk to you practically. You've been the lead sponsor of 422 bills during your 30 years in Congress, but only 7 of them have become law. Given that record and how dire things are, as you just laid out, do you need to find another lane or take a different approach here?
I don't think.
Yeah, so
I mean, like, just so, if anybody has any doubts about what went on before, Bernie Sanders was just laying out how big of a failure this COVID bill is, which now looks like it's not even going to happen, according to Mitch McConnell's office. They're looking like they're going to, taking a little bit of, and they're not even going to, push through this really, really meager and ineffective COVID response bill. And Bernie Sanders is on MSNBC during the middle of a national pandemic, trying to argue for the real fact that people are suffering and they need help right now. And Rhule decides to go back to an old 2020, 2016 playbook with the graphic ready To a Bernie Sanders legislative record.
Yeah, no shit. Or they just have a file over that MSNBC, like Bernie attack slides. But I mean, the obvious point is, of course, Bernie's preferred legislation wasn't getting passed by these horrible ghouls that have been running Congress for the past 20 years and the people that run them, right? Obviously, that's kind of the point of Bernie, is like what he's represented. Maybe it reflects on Congress, actually, Stephanie, and the people that you are normalizing with every breath you take in those studios. And I would just want to add, that is a Destiny talking point. I don't follow him very closely, but I do know that he was arguing that. That was about the time I stopped listening to it, because I think that is lazy. Yeah, I mean, it's really just a pathetically lame argument that kind of just has no... It's a logic lord argument is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. There's no historicization happening. It's unbelievable.
This is how they get away with it, right? This is literally how, especially like centrist Democrats and liberals, get away with the fact that they have had power, that they literally within our lifetime had controlled all branches of government, and they weren't able to push through, the programs that they argued that they support, right? Looking out for workers, making sure that minimum wage is increasing, all these things. Obviously, they don't campaign on that, but private conversations, they say like, oh, we want that, but we just have to defeat the Republicans first. We have to be in power. They had that in our lifetime, very recent history, and they didn't do it. And somebody like Stephanie Rhule, I mean, look, a lot of people on MSNBC are nightmares, but her especially, I mean, this is somebody who just recently got in trouble for doing ad spots for JP Morgan Chase during the middle of a pandemic, one of the largest banks in the United States.
Oh, God.
She was doing ads for them. And this is a supposed journalist. Right. And it should be very clear to anybody who still has any doubts about it, where these people lie. And they are very much, they want to make sure that their friends are in power, that they're rich and the wealthy are in control of the system. And somebody like Bernie Sanders is a direct threat to it, which is why they always pivot. They never argue against Bernie Sanders on the merits of his actual plans. They always try to find some technicality to say like, oh, well, this is why it's impractical to argue for Medicare for all or for minimum wage increases or whatever. Or in this case, doing the bare minimum in a pandemic when we have countless other examples of countries who have been able to provide for people on a baseline during a massive quarantine.
I mean, we're literally at the point where you're having a noticeable rise in shoplifting because people are hungry, and you have Stephanie Rhule trolling. I mean, really just pathetically shallow stuff. Really, really disappointing. Do we want to do anything else before we get to the Tyson segment, David?
No, I mean, look, like Stephanie Rhule is just such a moron.
Yeah, she's very wealthy, right? Like, yeah, like beyond the...
No, she's like ex-banker. You know what I mean? Like she came out of this world, and that's why she defends it with every, fiber of her being.
Right. Yeah. Pretty great stuff. So now let's move from finance to factory farms and food processing plants. One of the biggest ones, Tyson. Let me get my notes up because I hit the books for this.
No, you should.
I've known Tyson's bad for a while. I've stopped buying their frozen stuff. I'm a big air fryer fan, and so I've come across Tyson in the sections that I habitate. And even before this whole coronavirus betting thing, which I'll detail later, the word was out that Tyson is particularly egregious when it comes to a lot of different business practices. So 20% of beef, pork, and chicken in the U.S. Come from Tyson, per their claims. It's a family-owned company. Let's see this. So just to update on the news why this is a peg. So in November, CEO Dan Banks announced suspensions and an Eric Holder-led investigation representing the firm Covington Burlington into that. And that announcement came a day after a lawsuit alleged that plant managers were betting, among other things, including like telling people to ignore their symptoms and keep working. But the headline is betting on how many employees would catch coronavirus, literally cash buy-in. So like that, right. Which is a detail. Like it's not a hypothetical thing. This guy took money, but I worry that there's going to be too much focus on the guy who set up the betting pool, who is egregious, and I will, we will spend time on him. But I just want to focus on Tyson in general first. So Tyson's been a problem for a while, as I mentioned, and the suit names Banks. CEO Dan Banks. There's a couple CEOs mentioned here. Chairman John Tyson, another CEO Noel White, President Stephen Stouffer, Vice President Tom Brower, and those are the people I think we really need to focus on. And then you also have this manager, Tom Hart, the safety lead, Brett Tompkin, and some other managers. 42.4 billion in sales in a year last year. Now the Waterloo plant where this betting occurred is the largest pork plant in the country. 2,800 workers, over 1,000 of them were infected with COVID, and these numbers are as of May. Right. So this is what the lawyers are at. These numbers are obviously way more because COVID hadn't really even it got to the meat plants in May in like places like South Dakota and Iowa, but it hadn't really gotten to those areas. So these numbers are definitely way up. But as of May, Tyson as a company had 4,600 cases and 18 deaths. They told workers they had a responsibility to feed the U.S. population. And deny positive results. You basically continue to work. And one supervisor was literally told by another to return back to work because we all have symptoms. By mid-April, even the sheriff of the county said, what was the quote here? The plant conditions shook him to the core. That was the time of the cash buy-in pool. There's also one reported case of production line vomiting. And the company offered $500 bonuses for employees that didn't miss a day through the 3 months. Right. So $500.
Yeah. That's your incentive structure right there. Make sure, even if you're sick, come into work.
3 months. So 5 divided by 3. Yeah. What 33 per month? I can't do the math that fast. 160. I don't know. So then this article in response to like, oh yeah, we're doing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of safety measures in response to all this stuff. Now we're way better than we were earlier this year, but it's worthwhile putting hundreds of millions into context for what it means for Tyson. I've already mentioned the 42 billion number, but in the most recent quarter, they cleared nearly $700 million in profit. Since 2000, they've paid out $100 million in employment and safety violations. And just to detail one of those things, which kind of marries both those topics, in 2011, the biggest one, $32 million case where they were sued for wage theft because they forced employees to suit up and take off protective equipment off the clock. And just another note on that. So that was in 2011. In 2015, we have a number of their amputations for 1 year, and it was 17. Guy lost the index finger, tip of the finger, both hands to an auger, distal portion of third finger. So a lot of fingers getting lost in these meat plants. The safety conditions aren't great. And it's you hear that the position these workers are put in, just complete desperation because they aren't being taken care of by the broader government. So they need the jobs. They need the money to feed their families. And so they are going and they're under the thumb of these companies. You were going to say something?
Oh, I mean, I have stuff too. Just like people need to understand, one, how dangerous this kind of work is. I mean, this is, a job that is more dangerous than being a cop, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
I just want to say one thing real quick about these amputations is that's just full amputations. That doesn't mention the numerous maimings that of course happen that are way more than full, like clear losing an appendage. So anyway, go on.
No, and like the thing is that it's an open secret. Most people have an understanding that these facilities, treat their employees horrifically. And what we've seen over the past few months has been Donald Trump getting together with all of these, the owners of these companies, Tyson and Smithfield, et cetera, to make sure that they are protected, from any kind of suits for infecting people with COVID or infecting their employees with COVID. They were pumping up meat production at a time when they should have been, pulling it down because you can't safely social distance on an assembly line plant like that. If you are up in your capacity. And, but this is something that started long before, obviously, COVID. And it also needs to be noted that this is an open secret, not just to people in progressive media or activists or things like this, but within the government itself. And one of the most egregious of this kind of merging between government and private enterprise is the fact that in a lot of states like Georgia and Iowa and North Carolina, you have people who have high up positions in government who make money from Tyson. So in Camilla, Georgia, there was early warning signs that there was going to be an outbreak, and the county health director had to recuse himself because he makes so much money personally from his dealings with Tyson. OHSA, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, found in 2017 that workers in meat processing facilities are unlikely to report egregious worker violations, worker health safety violations, et cetera, because these companies are notorious for retaliation. And this is an industry that on average salary is something around $12 an hour. So these are people who do not have a lot of money saved up in the bank to deal with a kind of legal fight. And that's the way that they like it. A lot of these plants are very secluded, and they're in rural areas where there's not a lot of other jobs. So this is one of those kind of situations where it's the only game in town, and you better shut up and sit down and shut up if you want to keep your job or maintain any kind of normalcy in your life. I mean, these are just egregious corporations, and it doesn't have to be this way. But because we have such a merging of government protecting these industries, like we saw so exceptionally with Donald Trump, very recently, but also for years and years, it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, I mean, court documents in this case make plain that executives were lobbying the Trump administration for protection from mitigation efforts, being like shutdowns and things like that. No doubt they're lobbying for immunity from lawsuits, and they lobbied successfully Governor Kim Reynolds to issue an executive order saying that only the state government and not local governments, like let's say your local government that has a pork processing plant in your area, can issue the shutdown orders. So they basically, freed Tyson from any local authority. And another thing we should mention before we get to the betting guy, because actually let's do that first, and then I'll get to something more positive. So there's this article here of this guy from last year of Tom Hart, who is the manager who issued the betting pool. And I think it's just interesting to put the sort of press on notice. Don't write articles like this. So Waterloo man works his way from custodian to Tyson plant manager. And I just want to focus in on some of these quotes and how the sort of like post-game basketball press conference style of these, and how credulous this reporting is, right? It's all about support. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here today. He says basically he worked his way up. I mean, interestingly, from the in-house contractor that does sanitation. But the vapidity of this, first of all, the human resources manager's name is Terry Rottinghouse, which I think is a kind of a Dickensian name for somebody who works at a animal processing factory. But Terry Rottinghouse says it makes him a fantastic plant manager because he understands the entire process from the ground up. I have no doubt. But like this sort of thing is like, that is a big part of what I bring to my leadership team and our members each day. We have some of the greatest people out there. They want to be the best at what they do, but that's where we come in by letting them know what good is in detail. There's another thing, like if you've got good core values and put in the work and learn as much as you can, the doors of opportunity just open. I think we know what kind of core values get people promoted at Tyson, right? Exactly. And it's like, and then just like the way that the reporter here editorializes, through investing in employees, Hart lays the groundwork for the company's future, striving to improve Tyson by equipping employees. Like, look up Tyson before you write this. Anyway, okay, so that's probably too much on that, but do you have anything you want to say before I have a positive story about fighting Tyson?
Yeah, well, definitely, let's get to that. I just wanted to add one more thing. I mean, this is a company that 100% needs to be investigated, by the government, especially for what happened in North Carolina early on in the COVID crisis, where they were ordering their own private COVID-19 tests. And there are a lot of reports and allegations that they were purposefully suppressing the numbers that were coming out of their processing facilities in North Carolina, right? So this is an organization that is just ripe with corruption, evil, and wickedness, and 100% needs to be investigated as soon as possible.
Yeah. And here is a story you would have heard about if the Democratic Party were a functioning opposition from 2017. Well, I mean, they're completely bought by Tyson. Let's not. I mean, I'm sure. I haven't checked the fund on this, but I'm sure Tyson is an equal opportunity donor to terrible candidates.
Yeah, definitely.
But here's this amazing story, and this is very left-reckoning story. This is from civeleats.com, but how a Kansas town held off a Tyson plant. Tonganoxie residents are the latest in a new wave of rural communities standing up to Big Ag, and it's just, I think, really inspiring the way, like, one, how fast and decisively the community came together against this Tyson plant. And it's, like some basic infrastructural ideas, like there's going to have to be a lot of trucks here. And Tyson, like, okay, so here's the dynamic that's just remarkable that this Civil article outlines. So Tyson, because they have all this power and this cozy relationship with all these politicians, they negotiate these deals so they can open up a plant in your county, but not pay any taxes, or get extremely good tax deals. So in Leavenworth here in Kansas was like, the people were very quickly realized, and I think this is indicative of a rising consciousness on these matters, that okay, so you're gonna make this huge plant here, and you're gonna have how many semi trucks coming in and out of this place, and then we're gonna be stuck with the bill for the infrastructure. And this article also does a good job of going into how these organizers avoided a sort of racist scapegoating of the immigrant workforce there, because what a lot of these companies are doing is they're moving huge populations, like of Somali. I know that's big in with like the Amazon stuff in Minnesota, but this basically communities of migrants in, because they're a workforce that they can coerce better. And then you have the problem where the company isn't paying more in taxes, and those students have to go to the local schools, obviously. And then you basically are creating the conditions for some kind of backlash, because just like the roads, those schools can't deal with that new capacity. And you have the added effect of racial bigotry being stoked. So this is, and I mean, just a horrible like way that these corporations can play with people like that. And like meanwhile, like, donate to ICE so they have the policing force for when these populations that they put into these communities do get out of line. Like it's I mean, really everything is in the Civ Leads article, but the good news is they successfully did it. And not only that, but at the top of this article, the example was followed quickly. They say, after we published this story, Tyson Foods approached several other communities in Kansas. On December 7, 2017, officials from a second community, Sedgwick County, pledged not to offer the company economic incentives to build a plant after residents organized a No Tyson Sedgwick County campaign. Then the company released a statement saying it was, quote, not currently considering any potential property in Kansas. Well, Kansas, good job. And like, New York, we got all this, I guess, props for the Amazon stuff. But, belatedly, Kansas, I mean, amazing stuff there.
Oh yeah, no, it's a huge fight, and it's beautiful to see. And we have a couple more really exciting fights that are happening in in the South and in the Midwest coming up later in the show. I just wanted to take a second, since we sort of jumped the gun with this stream today. Thanks everyone for being here. You're here with us at Left Reckoning. My name is David Griscom, and I'm here with my friend, comrade, and co-host Matt Leck.
Hello, everybody.
And, I just wanted to fill people in as to, what's going on right now with the show. So we're going to start launching, our proper main show starting the first week of January. But up until then, we want to make sure that we're still here, talking to everybody, making sure we're covering all these stories that just frankly aren't being covered by a lot of progressive media, and certainly not by the national media. So we're going to be doing these kind of live streams on Thursdays and throughout the week. Later this week, for patrons, Matt and I are going to be doing a deep dive into Critique of the Gotha Program, one of my favorite Karl Marx texts. So definitely look out for that. And you can support us in the show over at patreon.com/leftreckoning.
Let me just note on the Gotha program stuff. Tomorrow, right after a Majority Report, I'm going to stream from the Left Reckoning Twitch, and I'm not sure what game I'm going to play, but I'll play something while I listen to the Gotha program with folks. So go subscribe to that Left Reckoning on Twitch to join that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're sort of building this out. It's going to be a lot of, similar format to what we were doing at TMBS. We have some really exciting guests that we're starting to line up in January. I'm looking forward to being able to announce those to y'all very soon. But if you're able to, become a patron. We have a little bit lower membership than we did at TMBS, trying to make it a little bit more equitable. So it's $5, and you get everything that all patrons get. And you're going to get post game starting in January. You're going to get these bonus episodes. I'm definitely going to try to do as much as we can, building out that kind of theory reading content. So this critique of the Gotha program episode that we're going to do over the weekend is going to be the first one of that. But if there's anything or subjects or texts or thinkers that you'd like us to dive into, we're definitely going to be doing a lot of that. And really excited, for everyone joining us, on this journey. If you missed it, definitely check out for the Michael Brooks tribute series, a conference that we've been putting up on a TMBS throughout December. This Tuesday, I was able to sit down with Richard Wolff, Mark Blythe, and Ben Burgess, which was a hell of a lot of fun. So we're going to be posting that on this YouTube channel, and I think also an audio version just as soon as I get that file all set up for y'all.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one back yet, but the Cornell and Slavo one was just remarkable. I mean, I'm being an English major grad. I really love how literary those guys get all the time. But what is astounding, I also just wanted to comment on it, is how well is to see Cornell and Slavo characterize Michael's work the same way they characterize somebody in the canon, with a familiarity actually, and it's very touching. And everybody who's participated in the three so far, I think we have out. I appreciate that so much, and Russ for organizing that, and Leisha as well. So
yeah, 100%. They've been wonderful, and all these talks have been really great. I also would like to let everybody know too. We'll try to take some questions from the Discord. So if you're a patron, you have access to that. Definitely throw some up in there. Make sure to add the mods, and they'll put those up so that we can see it. And also we'll do our best to see if we can answer any YouTube chat questions today too, as we get opportunities and sort of slowdowns in between these stories. But we got a lot coming up for y'all, so we should get back into it.
Yeah, where to next?
I think let's do Argentina, man, because this is a really exciting story. So I'll just set this up. This is something that I've been trying to cover as much as possible over the past few months since coronavirus started, because what was happening in Argentina was really such a horrific story of international finance just strangling a country in the middle of a pandemic. So if you missed the kind of, the setup to this, let me take you through real quick. Over the years, Argentina has had significant issues with their currency and also dealing with international finance, which it was made much worse under the neoliberal Macri government that just left power. It was all about austerity. They brought in a significant, something around like a $57 billion loan from the IMF, which I believe is the IMF's largest loan to a single country. So this is a country that was extremely indebted. And you have Fernandez, who was elected very recently, come into power with this massive economic disaster, again, from the free market friendly former right-wing government, trying to find a way to negotiate with these bondholders and the international credit facilities that they had to deal with, while also managing this pandemic. So as everybody's dealing with these lockdowns and this general struggle of dealing with coronavirus, the finance minister of Argentina was constantly having to be on the phone with bondholders, right? Particularly bondholders from the United States and Europe, including obviously, the pigs at BlackRock, who have gotten a nice cozy position in the Biden administration. Yep. It must be mentioned. So this is going on, and basically the bondholders are refusing to allow them to limit their payments, or at least get a little bit of a break while they're dealing with this coronavirus crisis, which again was insane. If you want to get paid back, I mean, it's a bizarre situation. Be talking, don't want to get paid back, and that's exactly what will happen in a situation where you just completely tank the economy because you're making the government pay off, these massive rates to bondholders. So that was something we were covering over the past few months. And I'll just add this analysis for people to understand too. The reason these bondholders were so fixated on making an example of Argentina was because they needed to send a message to all these other countries across the globe that they will not bend despite the fact that there's a global pandemic going on, that they will not accept any less than the maximum amount of profit that they can squeeze out of a struggling country, right? So that disgusting chapter ends, and Argentina was able to negotiate a meager cut, not enough, but a meager cut so that they could at least function on some level as a government. And now they're having to deal with the IMF, which again, I said, they have gone massively in debt to because of the McCree government, and also because they do need capital right now to be able to function as a government, to be able to take care of people during this crisis. So this is all going on, right? This big fight with international finance. But I want to share some, good news, at least for the class struggle, was that Argentina's Senate just passed a one-time millionaire's tax against the wealthiest people in Argentina, which should be noted. The rich have been leaving the country to basically spend the crisis in Uruguay, so that they can avoid, one, being in Argentina, and two, because they have these hopes of basically being freed from any kind of societal obligations, even though they own the vast majority of the wealth in the society.
Right, because Uruguay's handled COVID stellarly so far.
Yeah, exactly. But basically it also was becoming a bit of a tax haven for Argentine millionaires. And, this isn't just anecdotal, like Uruguay, they're non-resident, so the bigger, they have $500 million more than the beginning of the pandemic from people who've basically come over there. So there is significant capital flight going on. But anyways, the Senate was able to pass this, millionaire's tax, which is going to come, at 1 to 3% of millionaires' wealth. And it's going to affect people who have over 200 million pesos, which is about $2.4 million in USD. So, it's a significant victory, and basically following through on Fernandez's promise that he made very early in the pandemic, where he told the business class and the wealthiest something along the lines of, boys, it's time for you to pay more. So we'll continue trying to show solidarity with the people of Argentina, again, as they try to face this, significant human crisis of the COVID pandemic, trying to make sure that people aren't thrown out into the streets and are able to get the minimum standard, or hopefully higher than that, but, a standard of living so that they can get through this pandemic safely. And it just shows, again, I think more arguments are important. I think it's not worth it to get too deep into it because it can be a little bit distracting at times. But the fact is that these people they're wealthy in that society are disgusting, that they're actually going to let the country rot to protect their assets, instead of recognizing that they're parts of a society as well. And we all have responsibilities to one another.
Yeah, I mean, that's out the window for those guys. The super wealthy. I mean, they just go Amy Siskind on it and say maybe we should new borders. Yeah, that's unbelievable. I didn't know that about Uruguay becoming a bit of a tax haven for Argentine millionaires. That's fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, like, the thing is that we live in a globe right now where money has no borders, right? Where you're basically able to move money wherever you want, and it creates these really nasty situations where basically you can just see it when people actually. I want to make this point because I think it's an important philosophical point. This is a struggle for democracy, right? If you live in a society and you believe in the idea of democracy, that people have the right to make decisions over the way that society is going to be governed, right? Then the people should have the authority to see those policies followed through on. What we're seeing in Argentina is this fight where you have an international capitalist class. I'm talking about the Argentine millionaires, but also, American, bondholders who want to get paid by the government, basically saying we're going to refuse the democratic will of this society and we want to play by our own rules. This is a human struggle, but it's also fundamentally just a basic struggle for democracy to say that if you believe in the principles of democracy, that everyone should be subject to the same rules, right? Because the poor don't have those kind of rights. The poor can't just say, oh, actually, we're not going to play ball with the new rules of the government. We're not going to, we're going to hide our money. Not that working people have too much.
Well, they get demonized as caravans by Fox News if they try to do something like that.
Exactly, man. I mean, anyways, though, solidarity to the government there as they continue to fight. And remember, too, Fernandez is not some kind of like radical lefty socialist. This is very much just like kind of being pragmatic center-left governance, saying we have a crisis right now. We need to fund public services in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that they should have every right to pursue that goal.
Wait, he's doing it because he wants to help people and not because he's like worried about getting shamed by Jacobin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's do this Amy Siskind thing before we get back to serious matters. But just to remind people who she is. So let's see. Can I full screen this somehow?
Well, actually, yeah, see if we can get this tweet up first, because I'd like to set up her bio after we see what she said, why she's come to our attention.
Okay. Yeah. Here we go. So I'll share this, a beautiful tweet that she since deleted, which is why it took a bit of a effort to get it back up. But David. So
this is Amy Siskind tweeting, proposed map. New York and California are sick of supporting these red welfare states. And for those listening, the map is this stupid map, this meme that you've probably seen 1,000 times at this point, where, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, I can't go through all the states, and the entire Northeast, along with the Pacific Northwest and California, leave the United States and join with Canada to create some kind of monster called the United States of Canada.
Yeah, that thing would really sell weapons to Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah, definitely not. And and as a little dig at the rest of us in this country, if you don't live in the Northeast or in the Pacific Northwest, you now live in JesusLand.
Oh my God.
And it's such like mid 2000s liberalism, John Stewart style. I remember that book, God, Better Off Without Them. I don't know if you ever came across that, but it pissed me off. It was this kind of like liberal, Yankee argument that, if we got rid of the South and all of our social problems would be solved. And Matt, actually, if you don't mind on the doc, if you go down a little bit, there's a tweet too that you should bring up in a second. But let me just make this point, because this thing really digs at me and gets me mad. One, it's stupid, right? It's absolutely stupid. And people have been making, pointing out, for example, that, territories like Alberta and Saskatchewan aren't particularly liberal places, which fine. But that's not necessarily the problem with this map. The problem with this map is this whole idea, that these other states are, welfare states, that they're reliant on, Yankee industry and Yankee money. And our friend Erica, the white trans socialist, makes a good point here, Matt.
This one?
You bring up that she says, I swear to God, liberals just want an ethno state. And the map, for people who are listening, shows the percentage of counties' population identifying as both Black or African American and non-Hispanic. And if you see there, the highest concentrations of those populations are in JesusLand, are in the South, right? Which is a point that needs to be made over and over again, is that while all these liberals love to make, these points about how they're the anti-racist group, they are the first ones who want to actually wage, literal economic war on the parts of the country that are the most diverse.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing too, like, as if the wealth of this country isn't extremely bolstered by, for instance, like all the agriculture that happens in the middle of the country, like that, as if that money isn't why these coastal areas are so rich, right?
Yeah.
Like they're detached somehow.
Let's make this point really clear, and we'll get back to Amy in a second and why her bio is so funny for making this tweet. But you get this every once in a while, especially from New Yorkers that say things like, "Oh, we actually fund the federal government, right?" And all these other states don't. First of all, the way that they frame that is ridiculous because people get this idea in their heads that somebody who makes $50,000 a year in New York is getting taxed more than somebody who's making $50,000 a year in South Carolina. No, those are federal tax rates. They are the same. Why do you think that New York, is ending up paying more than other states? I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that this massive parasitic class of billionaires and millionaires have the highest concentration in states like New York and Massachusetts, and Connecticut, right? They pay more because that's where the wealthy people live in. And if you're like, let's drop even like our socialist perspective on this. If you're supposed to be a liberal who loves taxes, right? Why are you making this kind of bizarre argument that we shouldn't have a progressive, scale tax system in this country and instead move to some bizarre regional move? It's obviously absurd. And we also need to make this point endlessly clear. Why do New York have more millionaires and billionaires and Connecticut and Massachusetts? Well, there's a little thing called Wall Street, which is a system that extracts value from the rest of this country and the rest of the world and funnels it in to this very specific region, right? And allows for those people to profit immensely off of extracting the natural resources of this country and also the labor of people around the globe. And let's also not forget this with our good capitalist mentality. If you want to make money, you need money to invest. So we can't also exclude the fact that these are areas that benefited financially immensely off of slavery and off of the continued genocide of indigenous peoples in this country, right? These are not people who are innocent of the crimes of the United States. These are people who have benefited immensely from it. And this kind of bizarre argument that they make that somehow now they should have no responsibility to funding the federal government is absurd. And if I could just make one more quick point on this, this is why, if you want to live in a country like the United States that has a shared currency, you need to find a way to redistribute wealth throughout that society. Why? Look at what happened in the European Union over these past few years, right? If you have an economy that is using a currency like, for example, in Greece's case, the euro, right, which is highly valued, it puts you in a difficult position to be able to sell your goods and services on the international markets, right? Because you're using a currency that's extremely highly valued. So what you need to do is you need to find a way to redistribute the excesses of that society. And that's why the United States federal government functions in the way that it does, because you can't have a part of the country that's using the same currency, right, that is going to be highly valued in New York, and then not be able to provide the basic needs of people in South Carolina, Mississippi, et cetera, right? Because if you do that, then you're going to have a currency crisis on your hands and you're not going to be able to have a functioning economy in those other states. That's why we designed the system to work the way that it does. That's why we have a federal government that provides aid to people. And also, let's not forget what kind of aid we're talking about here. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and our very meager but important welfare state for people, right? This is what they're complaining about, is that poor people in the South, right, are getting things like Medicaid and are getting things like food stamps, et cetera, right, which are funded through, the federal government. It's absurd. It's a disgusting argument through and through. Its cultural aspects are disgusting, but when you actually take it a little bit, look under the hood, it's even worse.
So let's look under the hood of Amy Siskind for.
And actually, no. Let's pull it up because it's so good. Because like maybe this person, Amy Siskind, doesn't understand the role that New York finance plays in immiserating the rest of the country. But let's just see what she does.
Okay, well, let's first go to her Twitter page where this all started. So, activist, feminist, author. Interesting. Those are things that generally, I don't have problems with. The Weekly List website, Posk, I have no idea what the Weekly List is. Haven't come across it. And book. Political 50. Okay, now we're starting to get sus. President of the New Agenda. Okay, I don't know what that is. Former Wall Street exec. Now, that's funny way to put it, because that can be read two ways. That can be one, like, oh, I respect this person's credibility because they've been in the halls of Wall Street and they know like serious economics or something. Or it could be like as if she's like, chastened and, regrets it somehow. I think it's bit of the. I think she's trying to play a little bit both ways. But let's go to her LinkedIn. Amy Siskind is a national spokesman, blah, 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 blah. On Wall Street, Amy was a pioneer in the distressed debt trading market.
Oh.
She became the first female managing director at Wasserman Peralta. I mean, okay, she's been on Wall Street since the 80s. Is the NYU, Stern, okay, Cornell, and yeah, she's been working for banks until the 2008 when she starts to get political. Now, you might be wondering, maybe she saw the light after hanging out with those complete vultures on Wall Street. Well, her contribution to politics is sort of really summarized in this 2012 piece called Should Women Back Palin in 2012? And here's a choice paragraph from it. I am a lifelong Democrat who for the first time in my life voted Republican. So the entire time she was at Wall Street, she was a Democrat. She leaves Wall Street. She starts voting Republican. I'm a lifelong Democrat who for the first time in my life voted Republican in 28 elections. Now, I don't know if that's true. I think she might be lying. But if it's true, it's insane. I did this for one reason. McCain selected a woman as a running mate. For this act, I was accused of having lost part of my mental faculty. Some circa Victorian act of, quote, voting with my eaters. I love how these summarizations of the critique where the strange that the Democratic women were corralled to vote for Obama in 2008 because of one issue, God. Reproductive rights. Yeah.
Look, I mean, there you go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the one issue. Why people were voting for Obama over John McCain, right? I mean, give me a break. I mean, these people, there's not much underneath it. I mean, these are people who are elitist and
freaks,
and they're liberals in the sense, in like the kind of like Twitter sense of the word. They like to, point towards, people who are hurting, marginal people, but they functionally, they actually just really want to continue the and paying that working people in this country all across the board, are suffering under. And it's so stupid. And don't get wrapped up into it. Look, we all hate Republicans, don't get us wrong. But this kind of really stupid red state, blue state mentality ain't going to get us anywhere. And you're lining yourself up with literal Wall Street executives who have this bizarre fascination with Canada.
Yeah. Are we going to get in trouble with Noah Berlatsky for criticizing this? Because
I'm sure.
Identity first. Sure. I mean, this is why class is rather important once things start hitting the road. Is like she's the epitome of the lean in white feminism, where it's basically just can white women, which is noted by everybody, by the way, not just like dude bro white podcasters like myself. This is a common cliche people have of white feminists, which is like you just want to be able to exploit people the way white men do, basically. You want that position, and that's what Amy Siskind wants. And she's, I mean, what a freak, man! Like, honestly.
Absolutely a freak. I mean, at least she had the good sense to delete that after people harassing her. And I wouldn't bring up somebody who gets dunked on Twitter and then deletes their stuff. But this is somebody who literally, this is somebody who is like actually positioning themselves as a kind of political leader and has like actual material power in the society. So absolutely, I'll bring her name into it.
Yeah, this is the problem with liberals generally. Like they're unable to differentiate themselves from absolute freaks like this when it comes to issues that they care about. Amy Siskind's, she's got the pride flag all over the place. She's also it's grim stuff, and I just think like 500,000 followers follow this woman as some kind of like guide to the scary times we live in. Her on Twitter, her background picture is like people marching through the streets. We won't let you down, RBG.
I mean, that's almost.
I mean, she let us down, you idiot. That's the point.
Right? No, because this is somebody who would never show solidarity, for example, with the people who, again, tomorrow's a really big day in Alabama and for the country and the globe in this fight against Amazon, as workers at an Amazon facility in Bessemer, Alabama, are going to be voting for unionization. So absolute, solidarity with all of them, and we'll be watching that really closely. And I hope that goes through. I've been following their social media presence, and it's very much, geared toward workers in the facility. And I love their messaging so far. But this is exactly the kind of struggles that people like Amy miss, right? Because they don't recognize, and it's willful ignorance too, by the way, because this is not somebody, I don't think, who would find too much that inspiring in a unionization drive at an Amazon facility, right? She thinks it's like, oh, they need to.
That's a balanced liability, David.
Because Amazon's been putting on some kind of woke commercials, during Sunday Night Football, right? I mean, these people just are not our friends, and we don't need to recruit them, because honestly, somebody who spent their whole life working on Wall Street and just immiserating people, and specifically, working on these horrible extractive industries, which have created such an unequal society in the United States. These people aren't our friends, and we need to understand that, and we also need to, push back against this kind of really stupid way of viewing the country, that the elites are trying to make you think this way. Because I'll tell you one thing, that a working class person in Queens, New York has a hell of a lot more in common with a working class person in Alabama or any other part of JesusLand than they do with somebody like Amy, right? So let's make sure that we're building that kind of cross-class solidarity, and put all this kind of nonsense, cultural nonsense, to the side.
Honestly, what kind of lunatic thinks that they are the common person when they have that arc of working on Wall Street for the 20 years leading up to Wall Street destroying the world economy, and then deciding they're going to start voting for Sarah Palin? Again, I'm not even mad at her. I'm mad at Alyssa Milano and all this bullshit resistance shit we have, welcoming these people as if they're not heinous freaks that are trying to do people harm. I mean, so Amy Siskind, I'm glad you're still out there tweeting, because it makes me feel alive to get that angry.
I know, I need to get a little red in the cheeks there.
Where should we go next? Should we do some Uruguay now?
Well, let's see if we can. Let me see.
Oh, we did have one. Yeah, I got one here. This is from Eric. I have a question for David. I had another mindfulness company reach out to me to see if I might be interested in signing my practice up. I think it's Eric Osgood, right? Tell me what you think. They got the idea from the hypnotist accidentally did in Office Space. I don't remember that. What did the hypnotist do in Office Space? I'm forgetting.
He, at the very beginning of the movie, he gets the main character to relax, and then he gets into that headspace, and that's why he doesn't go into work the next day, because he doesn't feel like it. Right? That's the whole premise of the movie.
Oh, right, because he oversleeps, right? Yes. Okay, that's funny.
I'll tell you. I really thanks, Eric. I really like the movie Office Space. I don't know if you're a big fan of it, Matt. And it always cracked me up. I just think it's a fun film. But I remember at college, one of my professors, really great, Iranian Marxist, super, hardcore. He was a great teacher. But everyone was telling me to watch this movie, and he finally watched it, and his criticism of it was so funny. He was like, well, I don't really, because everyone pushes about, how it really, and it does identify how hopeless work is, right? But the solution to the movie actually is not that they change their conditions, or that the workers rise up or do anything like that. They try to rob the company, but it falls apart. And what they're doing, they all just start working construction jobs so they can get fresh air, right? So I love the movie Office Space, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really show a way out of our exploitation. Not that movies have to.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about those. I mean, Office Space and The Office, as there's something about, and this is sort of the Cheers effect of sitcoms, particularly the episodic thing where you're only going once a week, where it tends to sort of dehistoricize, but it makes these things seem permanent. So you see The Office, right? And our generation didn't even really get to see office jobs like that.
Yeah.
Right. But when you put it even in the context of The Office, which it was a struggling paper company, it was still the paper company where people had jobs at. And it's you see jobs happening. I wonder how much that stuff is affecting us on just that level. It'd be nice to have that kind of job.
Think about them in The Office. There's one episode where the workers who load up the trucks and stuff like that are trying to unionize. and Michael and what's her name, Jan, it's been a long time since I've watched the show, give them this whole speech about what will happen if you unionize, that basically they're all going to get fired. Because
I forgot that episode.
And like that's like a big part of the show. And look, I mean, I'm not one of these people who thinks that everything that you enjoy needs to be some kind of perfect, class conscious and radical revolution. I promise you that would be a nightmare for me, because most of the stuff I like ain't that at all. But it is interesting to see. I mean, this was a major cultural icon. A lot of people watched the show, and it was like
the
really
world, right? Remade in multiple languages.
And it was really, trying to reinforce this kind of nasty anti-union, mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's just a quick tangent. I've been listening to Chris James, Jesse Farrar, and Mike Hales, their new show on Stitcher Premium, Good Mornings, a comedy show. But the thing that makes me sad is like, we should all be working at real radio stations.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Like previous generations, we could do that. We have like people have the talent, and then so we just sort of simulate it, right? Like people talk about getting like a left TV thing. It's all like like to have a left TV thing, you need one of the monopoly, legal monopoly channels in a community, and have control over that, because that's the attention you're commanding. But yeah, I don't know. It's depressing that like that sort of nostalgia stuff. It's like,
yeah. Well, actually, just to look at a couple more of these Discord questions, somebody has one that's a little bit in my wheelhouse. Somebody says, David, how sick is Sierra Hull? As soon as you listed the players on Ben's show, I bought all Sturgill's records. So sorry, just to fill people in. I go on Ben's show, I give them an argument every Saturday, and we do a country music section. And the most recent one that we did, actually the past 2 weeks, we've been doing Sturgill Simpson. And 2 weeks ago, we did one on his really phenomenal bluegrass album that he came out with 2 weeks ago. And I started listing out all of the incredible pickers who are on the album. So that's what this person is talking about. Anyways, I won't read the whole thing because they're just shouting out all these awesome, pickers on the album. But they wanted to ask us a question. Any thoughts on getting musicians on the show to interview? Seems like a good way of sneaking the show and our politics into a wider audience. Also a great excuse to talk to heroes. I want to hear you interview Willie. Well, I would love to interview Willie Nelson. He has obviously an open invitation. I definitely have interest in talking to musicians on some level. As goofy as it might sound, I'm a big proponent of honky tonk socialism. I think that we need to be in all aspects of culture. So I'd love to be able to have, musicians on the time to both, not both, but, country and, people like, our friend Napoleon the Legend is always insightful to talk to about music and also about politics. So those are always, some of the best interviews that we can get with creative people. So I'll be sure, to keep my eye out to see as much as we can facilitate that. And hell,
yeah, we did quite a lot of that. Willie Q. I mean, we had a number of musical, I would love to keep doing that.
Yeah, it's all connected, man. I mean, it's all that music and art are all connected into all of this. And, I'd love to talk to Sturgill Simpson. I know he's been on the Trailbillies podcast a couple times, which are phenomenal interviews. So I've always been, a little bit envious. I'd like to be able to do something like that sometime.
Yeah, that I haven't, to be honest, like when we've in the brainstorm I've had, it's been like, authors. I haven't really been thinking along those lines. But yeah, I mean, there's Ezra Koenig, Vampire Weekend. You went on the Bernie stuff. You should come on Left Reckoning. I mean,
oh hell yeah!
But yeah, that sounds interesting. There's another question here I want to get to real quick. Something I heard Matt speaking to was the difference between managing and cultivating democracy. Can you expand on those from a Marxist perspective and suggest any good reading on the topic? I think the main person, when I have those sorts of thoughts, it's often Gramsci. That like, this, I don't know. How would you put that, David? I guess I don't mean to give you a hot potato, but
no, I mean, I think we've used the term what cultivating democracy in the sense of like, how the Democratic Party operates is like they don't want to expand their base; they want to control them. And I think a great example of that is New York State. Why is it more difficult to vote in a Democratic primary in New York State than it is difficult to vote in Texas? right? And that's because in New York State, they understand that the Democratic Party is the dominant party, and they want to make sure that they can control the voting base. They don't want to expand democracy.
Yeah, they're afraid of new voters, frankly,
Yeah.
and what they might ask them to do.
Exactly. And it's old politics, but it's also very much a calculated move. It's the same reason that fighting for things like ranked choice voting is hard, right? Because these people, the main parties, like, they do not believe in democracy as a fundamental principle, something that they should be, just on a moral level fighting for, regardless of what the outcomes are for them personally.
Yeah, where the rubber meets the road, I think, is something on this defund the police squabble that Biden's still squawking about, saying it's going to cost him Georgia, which is like a working political party is able to use the energy of the grassroots and channel it into something productive, not just complain about it the entire time. And that's because that's the difference between acting like a cultivator and acting like a manager. But I think Gramsci, the notebooks, I think is the place I would start there.
Yeah. I think that's on. And someone else asked us a question about the Western Sahara situation. I'll try to get back to you on that. I don't have anything, hot take on that.
The short story, as far as I know, is they normalized relationship with Israel, and now it looks like another arms deal is going to come down the pipeline for Morocco. So it's guns for, saying Israel's cool, basically.
Jesus Christ.
So what can Biden do about that?
Only democracy in the Middle East.
I mean, like, think about like.
I'm tongue in cheek when I say that, by the way.
Right, of course, yeah.
Mad at me.
Yeah. Like the thing about, I remember Netanyahu coming to Congress in 2015 and speaking to the Republicans, and even like Tim Kaine was out there like, well, I'm not going to show up to this as a partisan, thing. But unfortunately, I don't think that lesson has really taken as much as it should have. I mean, I was hoping, naively, I guess, that the Trump administration could be used to paint like Israel is just like Trump, Eastern Hemisphere. But that didn't happen. And I don't know, like, it's really the ultimately discouraging thing was 2018. The Democrats have this amazing like bill that has all this cool stuff in it, and they spend the launch of it talking about Ilhan Omar, saying all about the Benjamins.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I don't know. I think somebody smarter than me would need to answer that question.
I mean, the reality is that Netanyahu has overplayed his welcome with a lot of American liberals. In 2015, it wasn't that the Democrats were somehow realizing that they needed to stand up for the humanity of Palestinian people. It was because Netanyahu was showing up to the United States and wasn't showing respect to Barack Obama, right? Because he was, he went directly to Congress because, Obama basically didn't want to have, an in-person meeting with him. So that's what that was about, right? But the reality is, it was like, because Netanyahu has banked so much on Trump, I'm sure there will be some, extent to a realignment, but not anything major or not anything particularly substantive. I mean, we have to continue this fight, for Palestinian dignity and democracy as well as we can in the United States, obviously, because the United States is such a supporter financially of, the apartheid regime in Israel. And, we also need to show cross, Atlantic solidarity with our friends in the Labor Party who are continuing to face this horrible, honestly, like persecution. It's an attack on the left in the UK by Keir Starmer to try to make sure that the Labour Party is able to regain its place as a safe space for capital and the wealthy and imperialism. So we have to be really vigilant, because look, they try to do the anti-Semitism stuff against Bernie. They're obviously not afraid of doing it against Ilhan Omar and Rashida. We just have to be really strong on it. And I think there's a lot of lessons in the United States to learn from what has been going on in the UK, is that we actually need to be quite firm when we get these kind of, just absurd allegations, right? Not, like, what I mean by being firm is just saying, like, that's BS to say that Bernie Sanders is being anti-Semitic, or that Ilhan, saying that she believes that Palestinian people deserve dignity. Is it she's being, some kind of secret cause,
or just commenting matter-of-factly about the influence of like Israeli money in politics. And like, of course, there's all sorts of money that could be, you could be investigating, but Israel is a major one, a majorly influential one. And like, we spent all this time doing Russiagate. Like, again, like, it would have been nice to have had a bit of Israelgate too, because there's stories there. I mean, not to mention just the quid pro quo of normalized relationships, and we'll give you some like missiles.
Exactly. The only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is the sort of thing where, one, you need to teach liberals to start using and not be afraid of Mandela, and like lessons he said about certain
or
things.
Desmond Tutu, right? It's just like, Desmond Tutu, was calling what was happening in Israel an apartheid state, right? And it's just like, when people say like, well, that's offensive to people who actually lived through apartheid in South Africa. It's like, well, I think this is somebody who probably understands what that was like.
Yeah, exactly. What should we wrap up with, David?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, because I told people I would do it. This will be just a quick kind of just shout out, and then let's end with the Ben Noah thing real quick.
Okay. Cool.
Because we should at least just set it up to talk.
I mean, I did waste time reading that entire thing for Noah,
exactly.
So I think we should make some content out of it.
I just wanted to, to let people know, because folks had asked me to, to mention that former President Vasquez of Uruguay, who was president in 2005 to 2010, and then again from 2015 to earlier this year, passed away. He was the first, left-wing president of Uruguay, and he came about during the time of the pink tide. He was a former from poverty. He did a lot to make sure that the healthcare system was running well for people across the board. He negotiated energy cooperation with Venezuela during a time when the country under Hugo Chavez was facing immense pressure from, the American imperialist hegemony. He also normalized relationships with Cuba, which is significant in a country that in Uruguay's case, that has this horrible history of military dictatorship. He also worked with the Kirchner government to look for bodies of people who were murdered in both Uruguay and Argentina by those horrible military dictatorships. I'll post Pepe Mujica, who we talk about a lot on this show, has a really nice, remember it's in Spanish, but I'll post it for anybody who might be interested in checking that out. And he was fairly moderate in office, but he made a big impact on the country, particularly by being one of the first left-wing, the first socialist president of the country, and being a part of this pink tide, which was an incredible movement, had good relations with Lula, etc. So it's definitely a sad loss, and I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged that and pointed that out. But on after talking about serious things and serious people, let's move to something that's not so serious.
Oh, God.
And I don't know really how to introduce this other than the fact that if socialists ever come into power in the United States, and we ever have the opportunity to provide people with presidential medals of freedom, I think I would nominate first and foremost, maybe not first and foremost, but up there, Comrade Ben Burgess. Because Ben Burgess has the patience to deal with such nonsense. And we needed to do it from both the kind of like super whiny liberal side and also debating libertarians. Sometimes I see him write about something like, God, how did he spend time on this? But I'm always happy that he does, because it means we don't have to.
I got to pause here because I read Noah's piece and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like where to even start on this stuff? And luckily then I read Ben's piece, and Ben was exhaustive about everything and can leave us to just sort of comment on the funny parts, which that's what I, love about Ben. So yeah, you did, go ahead.
No, he's very helpful for that. And just to fill people in, this guy, Noah Broltowski, wrote a piece called Why Class First Leftists Are Wrong. And, it's the kind of classic bizarre argument where they create this caricature and this like philosophy and this political movement that does not exist, where there are just a bunch of people walking around saying racism doesn't exist, sexism doesn't exist, homophobia and transphobia don't exist. And we need to just focus on, white bubbas in the South, right? Like this bizarre argument that nobody is advocating for. And it's worth noting, honestly, this is of the same variety as the Bernie Bro narrative, where it's just like, it doesn't matter how often you prove them wrong or just say like, or just point to people who directly contradict this narrative. And then also when you demand for evidence, it's very, very thin. But unless you had anything to add, I was going to read a brief bit from Ben's Ben's piece that I think sort of sets this up, because I don't want to bore everybody with it, but we really want to, to set this up and then move into why Noah Bertowski is always wrong, right?
Yeah, I just want to characterize Noah's piece as, it wouldn't be published anywhere. It's not rigorous. He calls the Civil War an anti-racist struggle. That's how he codes that, which makes his argument a lot easier, frankly. It's and regularly underestimates the centrality to economics, even in the issues that he's talking about, even when he pretends to grant it. But yeah, go on with your part from Ben.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, we'll get to all that other stuff after, because it's going to give me a migraine. But let me just read this from Ben's, which I think sort of highlights the central argument that Bertowski makes. This is from Ben's piece. Bertowski describes class-first leftism as the belief that economic class is the main form of oppression in the United States and the world, and that other forms of discrimination relating to identity, racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., would be relative non-issues if we could attain economic equality. So, end quote. Here's Ben. That's actually two definitions, and nothing he says as the article goes on clarifies how they're supposed to relate to each other. Does he think believing either of these things entails believing the other? If not, do you have to believe both of them to count as class-first leftists, or will believing one do? Nothing he says in what follows gives us any indication of how he'd answer these questions. And again, and this is why having somebody like Ben take the time to go through this essay, and you should read Ben's articles. It's not too long, but it's definitely thorough, and just sort of saying, like, at the end of the day, there is no real claim there that is one consistent throughout the piece. Because one thing that Noah keeps on using is this word oppression, right? And of course, like, oppression exists as like an idea, like that's obviously, it would be absurd to deny it, but like, what is the definition of oppression is so squishy. And just to give people an idea of what I mean by that, all the morons at the IDW, all the morons at PragerU talk about oppression all the time. What kind of oppression? White male oppression, right? So even somebody like Noah would probably say, like, well, that's not oppression. Well, then what is oppression, right? Because it's a term that is very difficult to define, and it's a hallmark of Noah's writing, especially in this piece.
Yeah, that's actually a key point of why isn't say anti-white bigotry as concerning of a problem as anti-black bigotry, for instance. It's because of the underlying structure of economics that has exploited one of those class of people for the other. And like, the thing is Ben makes a funny point, which I think is true, about saying it's not as if the British Empire invaded India for the sake of culturally appropriating curry. And this is a bit that I've wanted to do, and we haven't been doing bits as much since Michael passed. But the idea that, like, why are all these black people here for people to be racist to? They weren't brought over here so the planters could have somebody to be racist to. They were brought over here to have somebody to do the work, a labor force that they could coerce, that couldn't escape because you can't run away. Right. That's why like they sent Native Americans to the Caribbean and brought black people here. Like, you want that labor force, so that's why. And like there wasn't a slave on the Lewis and Clark expedition so they had somebody to roast the whole time. It was so they had somebody to do the hard work. That's the limit. That's where I would put my case for the primacy of class in these sorts of. And I also want to say Noah's completely, there's a whole bunch of verbal pretzel making when it comes to class and that objective, the sort of philosophically objective part of it, which he doesn't, like, is completely worthless to read as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the Noah thing is one thing at this point, but there's 2 points, to be made about, what you were just saying, or at least like 2 examples that really, hit that home. The Field sisters, who have a great book, Racecraft, have the line basically saying what you just said, is that, like, a lot of liberals portray, slavery in the United States as a system that was designed to produce white supremacy. Well, actually, slavery was a system that was designed to produce cotton. And racism was a necessary byproduct of that. And so, like, the thing is that, like,
sugar and tobacco before that, like, it's always the commodity.
Well, it's like the point is not that, first of all, the class first leftist is an imaginary category, but the people they're trying to accuse of that, the argument, no one is making the argument that racism is not something that exists in our society, but rather that kind of this kind of metaphysical category, it becomes something that, first of all, that's why like a lot of NGOs and people in power prefer it to be that kind of category than an actual material one, because at a certain point, there's not much that you can do other than, attend a bunch of seminars, right? To like, kill this like demon within you, right? So like racism certainly exists, and it exists separate from even like people who are directly involved in economic production, but it comes out of a system that perpetuated it and deepened it and reflected it in our society for the maintenance and the defense of the super rich, powerful, and for economic production. That's the fundamental argument here, and it's bizarre to me why that seems to be something that is so absurd, they treat as it's absurd or as dismissing the reality, because the fact is that you're actually looking at the reality much more like holistically and understanding how fundamental it is to American society, right? That like the engines of this society are greased with this system of hatred and bigotry, and they're greased with it to perpetuate returns for a small group of people. That's the point that we're making, right? Yeah. And honestly, that makes the anti-racist struggle in the sense of like dealing with it substantively central to like socialist politics, right? And like that's why I get heated about it, because I don't like one being accused of being a class first leftist, somebody who's insensitive to these kind of plights that people face, especially because it's such a central part of my understanding of the world is this kind of anti-racist struggle. And it pisses me off that these people who think that we're going to solve racism with the Chase Bank sponsorship,
right? Exactly,
are the people who are going to come here and say that like, oh no, we're actually the ones who are trying to deal with this problem. It's like, no, you're not. You're perpetuating it again, and you're distracting and trying to prevent us from ever being able to deal with it, right? And
it's the dilution of anti-racism into a managerial project as opposed to a structural critique and demand for change. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, people like Amy Siskind would make a lovely anti-racist under these terms. Yeah. And it's so like, we're going to get a migrant labor force that ICE is policing in your community, and they're going to fill up your schools, and it's just on you to take the wear and tear and deal with that better through maybe some mindfulness and some seminars about not being bigoted. Like, I think it is that's fundamentally what we're talking about when we come to the management thing and the liberal management projects. Mm-hmm. It's what it is. If you're not, and it's funny, like Noah talks about like BLM, and it's like, and he says like even BLM is talking about defund the police. Like, the economic part, you even acknowledge that's where the rubber is hitting the road here. Like, of course, all the other stuff like police murders and that stuff needs to be addressed. But Ben Burgess makes a really good point, which is that poor white people are killed way more in this country than they are in other countries too. And maybe like, I mean, I know the way I've heard people talk about this, plenty of people from white people, if anybody, is that like the realization that that's happening is an eye-opening and useful one for this struggle, not one that like Noah's idea that there's some sort of like competition here, and not really. The class lens is just central in certain contexts because like it's super important. And if you lack that, then you haven't really accomplished much. You've accomplished Amy Siskind and Lean In.
Mm-hmm. I think that's 100% right. And unless you had anything else on that, I actually wanted to use this to sort of plug a conversation we're going to be having this weekend. Kind of, Noah's stupid argument using the term, for example, oppression. I'm going to be going to do a deep dive into a lot of Marxist texts, just trying to give some folks, a good understanding of them, and also it'll be fun for Matt and I to be able to revisit those. But the text we're going to go through this weekend is the Critique of the Gotha Program. And it's a text that sometimes you read it the first time and it seems like Marx is being a little bit tedious. He's criticizing, ostensibly socialist program, and he's tearing it to shreds. Because within it, there are all of these kind of squishy terms like fair distribution and things like that that when you investigate them further are completely meaningless. As Marx makes the point, like, what is a fair distribution of property? Would a member of the bourgeoisie argue that the current distribution system in this society is fair? Yes, they would, right? Like, you need to have concrete understandings of these things. And what do I mean by that? The scientific Marxist understanding of that. And I know a lot of people get worried when they hear that word because they think of dogmatism. And I don't care about the word in particular, but what that idea represents when people say scientific Marxism is trying to understand the world objectively and scientifically. So understanding, as we were talking about earlier, why, American, racism takes on the very specific bent that it has, why it has the kind of, the focus on the things that it focuses on. Well, it was because it was a system that was designed to protect the supremacy of a certain group of people. And it was also a system that was designed to make other, like, white workers feel more powerful than other workers, things like that, right? And so that existed because it was trying to defend an economic program, one that you can understand materially and scientifically, right? So that's why in Marxism you use words like exploitation that actually have like fundamental definition, as to what they are. So like what being a scientific Marxist is, or I guess just more generally being a Marxist is we have the moral judgment, but that actually comes after we have a kind of strong scientific understanding of the mechanism of society, because we want to change it, because we make a moral judgment on the society. We say that it's wrong and it's wicked. So we look at the society as it is, and then we use the tools that we have to understand where are the opportunities for change. That's why, I don't want to go on a tangent, but that's why the Noah piece makes me so mad, because they fixate. He actually talks about, how like Marx, how like socialists or whatever, they fixate so much on class because it's the highest form of oppression. No, they don't. You know who didn't do that? Karl Marx. Like, people have been oppressed in the society worse than working people, like worse than proletariat, right?
Karl Marx also wrote about the Civil War, and Noah might want to look that up.
That is a good point too. But like the point is that like the reason that the proletariat, the working class, is central to Marx's like revolutionary theory of change is not because Marxism is a philosophy that says the most oppressed group in society is going to be the one to change it. It's actually because fundamental to capitalism is the exploitation of labor, the exploitation of the working class, right? The entire system runs through them. The entire profit-making system runs through this class that does not benefit in the same way that the owners do, that the capitalists do. So what Marxism says is that because this entire system runs through them, they actually have the possibility of flipping it fundamentally and creating something new out of that. That's the Marxist materialist understanding, which is very different from a kind of liberal idealist understanding, because like the way a Noah would look at it is like, is a working person the most oppressed person in society, right? Marxists aren't thinking about it in that way. They're saying like, where do we have the opportunity to fundamentally shift the economy, which would change a hell of a lot of things in our lives? And that's why there's a focus on the working class. So it's not this kind of historical argument that this is the first and most oppressed class in human history. Far from it. But it's actually one that has within it a society to fundamentally shift that. So anyways, we're going to try to talk about that.
I just want to say a little bit more, bring it back to that Tyson Foods plant, which is when the organizers had to specifically guard against the scapegoating of the migrant communities. I, as a Marxist, completely believe that there is a way to integrate these communities of, like, say, Somali refugees into a rural community. But I think step one is not give the corporation a tax break. The step one is make sure the community shares in the new wealth coming to that fucking community. It's not actually that hard. And I think if these new migrants were coming with also like a system, like a school system that's being upgraded and roads, people are going to be a lot more positive about it. But it's the way we keep doing these things. Like, guess what, Tyson? To incentivize you to go, like, abuse this workforce in some rural place, like, here's some tax breaks. That's not that. This is where it's at. It's not treating the people in Kansas to like welcome the people that are being oppressed better. Like, that would be nice if they were, but fundamentally you're not going to fix any of the problems that are happening here. So I mean, good on Ben. I'm sorry you had to, frankly, I'm sorry that I had to read that piece, because I think it was maybe the worst thing I read in 2020. Just confused and just imprecise. But apparently that's a NBC News. He has bylines in NBC. Good job, Noah. Anyway, that's all I have to say. David, anything else before we sign off?
No, I mean, thanks everybody for being here. I'm really proud for, how far we've come already in the short lifespan of this project, continuing, hoping that it's going to continue to grow. I know it will. If you're not already subscribing to us on Patreon, or patreon.com/leftreckoning, over the weekend, we're going to release this talk on the critique of the Gotha program. So if that's a text that you're interested in, definitely we'll try to make it accessible for people who haven't even read it, but you'll definitely get the most from it if you spend a little bit of time reading it. I posted on the Patreon. You can also find it at Marxist.org. Matt Morrow's going to be doing, I think
right after MR.
I think maybe when Matt's done, I might pop on here for 30, 40 minutes and do some YouTube chat, hang out for a little bit. And we'll try to do these live streams on Thursdays in December. And then, starting January, we're going to be doing our proper main shows. So there's a lot to look forward to. And, thank you everybody so much for showing